My son-in-law left a voicemail on a Tuesday afternoon. I still have it saved somewhere. His exact words were, "Frank, this is Daniel. Just so you know, Carla and I have decided this arrangement isn't working anymore. You need to find somewhere else to live. We need our space." Then he hung up. Didn't even wait for a response. I was standing in my own garage, the one I built with my hands 26 years ago, listening to a 34-year-old man tell me to leave my own house. I set my phone down on the workbench, and I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I finally had permission to do what I'd been too patient to do for 4 years. My name is Frank Calloway. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a structural engineer in Nashville, Tennessee, before I retired. I know how buildings work, how load-bearing walls distribute weight, how foundations hold or fail depending on what you put on top of them. I understand pressure and tolerance thresholds, and what happens when a structure is asked to carry more than it was ever designed to hold. I thought I understood people the same way. Turns out, I had some blind spots. My daughter Carla was always bright, driven, stubborn in the way that makes parents both proud and exhausted. She got her marketing degree, landed a decent job at a Nashville agency, and seemed to be building something real. Then she met Daniel at a friend's wedding in 2019. 6 weeks later, she was calling me every other day talking about him. I tried to be enthusiastic. He was charming enough when I met him. Good handshake, easy smile, the kind of guy who knows how to make a first impression last exactly long enough. They moved in together after 4 months. Engaged after 8. Married in a small ceremony 14 months after they met, which I thought was fast, but I kept that to myself. The trouble started quietly. Most trouble does. My wife Linda passed in 2020. Pancreatic cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to the end. After 34 years of marriage, I was alone in a 4-bedroom house in Brentwood that suddenly felt like it was made of echo. Carla was devastated. We grieved together, which was the one good thing that year gave us. 6 months after Linda passed, Carla called. She and Daniel were having financial trouble. His landscaping business had lost contracts during the pandemic. Her agency had cut salaries. They were behind on rent for their apartment. Could they stay with me? Temporarily, just until things stabilized? I said yes. I want to be clear about something. At the time, I believed that was the right answer. Carla was my daughter. She was hurting. I had the space. I had the resources. Saying no never occurred to me. What I did not anticipate was that temporarily had a different definition in Daniel's vocabulary than it did in mine. The first year was manageable. They were quiet, mostly. Daniel picked up some new landscaping contracts and seemed to be rebuilding. Carla worked from home. We ate dinner together a few nights a week. It felt, some evenings, like having family around helped fill the silence Linda had left behind. The second year is when I started noticing the edges. Daniel had opinions about the house. Small ones at first. He rearranged the living room furniture without asking. He replaced my coffee maker with one he preferred and put mine in the garage. He started parking in the center of the driveway so that I had to angle my truck awkwardly to fit. None of these things were worth fighting about on their own, but they accumulated. Carla changed too. Or maybe she revealed something that had always been there and I hadn't wanted to see. She started treating me less like her father and more like a housemate who needed managing. She'd leave me notes about keeping the kitchen cleaner. She complained that my truck leaked oil and was staining the driveway, as if that driveway had appeared from nowhere and not from 26 years of my mortgage payments. By year 3, Daniel had stopped pretending entirely. He worked when he felt like it. His landscaping business was technically still operating, but he'd scaled back to 3 or 4 clients and mostly spent his days watching sports and making elaborate plans he never followed through on. Carla's salary was carrying them. My roof, my utilities, my groceries were carrying the rest. I calculated once, in a moment of insomnia at 2 in the morning, what 4 years of housing, food, and shared expenses had cost me. The number was somewhere north of $160,000. Neither of them had ever offered a dollar toward any of it. The comment started the way Rachel's had probably started in 100 other families, small and deniable. Daniel told a friend over dinner once, within my earshot, that living with an old guy set in his ways was challenging. He laughed when he said it. I was sitting 12 feet away. Carla told me I should think about downsizing because the house was a lot to maintain at my age. I was 62. I ran 4 miles 3 times a week and had built that house's back deck myself the summer before Linda got sick. Then I met Patricia. She was at a neighborhood association meeting of all places. 60 years old, recently retired from 30 years teaching high school English. Sharp and funny, and completely unimpressed with her own opinions in the way that genuinely intelligent people often are. We started having coffee, then walks, then dinner. I told Carla about her on a Sunday afternoon in the kitchen. Kept it simple. Said I'd been spending time with someone and thought it was going well. Carla set down her coffee mug. You're seeing someone? For a few months now. She looked at Daniel, who was leaning against the counter. Something passed between them. Dad, Carla said, and her voice had shifted into a register I didn't recognize. Careful. Deliberate. I think you need to slow down. You're still grieving Mom. This sounds like a rebound. Your mother has been gone 3 years. That's not very long. I let that sit for a moment. I'd like to have Patricia over for dinner sometime. I think you'd like her. Daniel set his coffee down. I'm not really comfortable with that. I looked at him. Excuse me, we live here too. We should have some say in who comes into our home. Our home. I want you to hear those 2 words clearly, because I heard them very clearly. Our home. 4 years of living in my house, and at some point the possessive pronoun had shifted without anyone consulting me. This is my house, Daniel. We've built our life here, Frank. That has to count for something. I didn't respond to that. I picked up my keys, said I had errands, and left. Drove to Patricia's apartment, sat in her kitchen, and told her what had happened. She listened the way good teachers learn to listen. Fully, without interrupting. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet, I said. But somewhere under that answer, I did know. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. That night I came home around 10. The house was quiet. I went to the garage and sat at my workbench. I still had a model of a bridge I'd been building for about 8 months. A replica of a historic covered bridge in Vermont that Linda and I had visited for our 20th anniversary. 1/4-inch scale. Handmade wooden components. The kind of project that requires patience and precision and a willingness to start over when you get something wrong. My phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. I almost ignored it. Then I pressed play. Daniel's voice, the one I described at the beginning. Flat, businesslike, final. Frank, this is Daniel. Just so you know, Carla and I have decided this arrangement isn't working anymore. You need to find somewhere else to live. We need our space. Not a conversation. A voicemail, like a landlord notifying a problem tenant. I set the phone down. Looked at the bridge model. Thought about structure. About what holds and what doesn't and why. Then I called my attorney. His name is Gerald Watts. We'd worked together on property matters for years, going back to when I was still working and buying investment properties. It was late, so I left a message. He called back in 8 minutes, which told me he keeps his phone close. Gerald, I need to talk about my estate documents and my property situation. It's emergency. Tomorrow morning. 8:30. Perfect. I want to explain something about what happened next, because I think people assume this was a decision made in anger. It wasn't. The anger was there, underneath everything, but it wasn't driving. What was driving was something I'd been too willing to suppress for 4 years. Self-respect. I had spent 3 years before this meeting quietly updating things. After Daniel's first "our home" comment, 2 years into their stay, I'd gone to Gerald's office for what I called a routine estate review. Updated my trust documents. Verified the property deed. Insured every utility account. Every insurance policy. Every tax record showed exactly one name as owner, mine. I'd been watching how this was developing and doing what engineers do, building redundancy into the system, preparing load paths for when the primary structure failed. The morning after the voicemail, Gerald and I sat in his conference room for 2 hours. They have no legal claim to the property? I asked, even though I knew the answer. None. Sole ownership has been yours continuously. No written agreement, no cohabitancy arrangement with legal weight, no contribution to mortgage or taxes. From a property law standpoint, they are guests who've overstayed. He paused. Extended guests, with some statutory tenant protections given duration of stay, will need to follow proper notice procedure. How long? 30 days written notice, certified mail, delivered to the address. If they fail to vacate, we file for eviction through Davidson County. Given the documentation we have on ownership and expenses paid, it would be resolved quickly. Draft the notice. I want it delivered by end of week. Gerald nodded. There's another matter you mentioned. Co-signed accounts? 3 years earlier, Daniel had needed a co-signer on a truck loan. $28,000 commercial vehicle for the landscaping business. Carla had asked me. I had agreed. A year later, there was a second loan, a piece of equipment, $11,500. I was on both as co-signer, total remaining balance somewhere around $33,000. I want to explore withdrawing from those agreements. Gerald made a note. Possible under changed circumstances doctrine. Given that you're initiating legal separation of living arrangements and can document estrangement, the banks have grounds to reevaluate. The primary borrowers would need to qualify independently or find a replacement cosigner, which they won't. Probably not, given income-to-debt ratios. Gerald looked at me over his reading glasses. This is your son-in-law and daughter. My son-in-law left me a voicemail telling me to leave my own house. My daughter didn't call to apologize. Yes, I'm aware of the relationships involved. Gerald nodded slowly. Then let's begin. I moved out of the house that same week. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because every morning I woke up in that house, I felt something I had finally found a name for. Erasure. They had slowly, methodically, over 4 years, made me feel like a stranger in the place where I had raised my daughter and built my marriage and buried my grief. I was done feeling that way. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Franklin, 12 minutes away. Clean, modern, south-facing windows that let in good morning light. I set up my workbench in the 2nd bedroom and brought the bridge model and my tools and about 40 years' worth of accumulated projects I'd been meaning to get back to. The certified notice arrived at the Brentwood house on a Friday. Daniel signed for it. I know because the mail service sent me confirmation with the timestamp. By Friday afternoon, I had 11 missed calls. By Saturday morning, 23. I was at Patricia's kitchen table drinking coffee and playing the crossword when my phone buzzed for the 24th time. I picked up. Daniel's voice was different from the voicemail. Less flat, more agitated. Frank. What is this? What is this letter? It's a 30-day notice to vacate or establish a rental agreement at current market rate. You can't be serious. The notice was prepared by my attorney and delivered by certified mail. I assure you it's serious. We live here. We have been living here. You can't just. The property deed shows one owner, Daniel. That's been true for 26 years, and it remains true today. You have 30 days to either begin paying market rate rent, which my attorney has set at $2,800 per month, or to find alternative housing. Silence on the line. Then, this is because of that woman. You're clearing us out for her. This is because you left me a voicemail telling me to leave my own house. I'm choosing to respect that request. I hung up before he could answer. Carla called 4 hours later. I let her talk without interrupting, which was difficult because what she said was painful in the specific way that only your own child's words can be painful. She said I was being vindictive. She said I was punishing her for falling in love. She said I had never accepted Daniel, and this was just the latest proof. She said her mother would be ashamed. That last one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. I sat with it for about 40 seconds. which is roughly how long it took me to remember that Linda, in her last weeks, had told me privately that she worried about the man Carla had chosen, that she hoped I'd stay close to Carla no matter what, but that she'd seen something in Daniel she couldn't quite name, and it unsettled her. Linda was usually right about people. "Carla," I said when she finished, "I love you. I have loved you your entire life, and I will love you until the last day of mine. But I need you to hear something. Your husband left me a voicemail telling me to vacate the home I have owned for 26 years. Not a conversation, a voicemail. You did not call to apologize. You called to defend him. That tells me what I need to know about where I stand in your priorities. I hope that changes. But until it does, the 30-day notice stands." I hung up. Sat in the quiet of my apartment. Outside, a cardinal was working over the bird feeder I'd hung on the balcony railing 2 days after moving in. Some things are easier than you expect, once you decide. The next 2 weeks moved in a strange rhythm. Patricia kept me grounded. Gerald kept me informed. Daniel and Carla, as far as I could tell, did nothing productive with the 30 days they'd been given. They didn't contact Gerald about payment arrangements. They didn't begin looking for apartments in any serious way. I knew this because Carla's best friend from college, a woman named Helen who had always been fond of me, sent me a quiet text message saying she was worried and that Carla seemed to believe I would back down. I would not back down. On day 22, I drove to the Brentwood house. Not to negotiate. I needed to retrieve some of Linda's things I'd left behind. A box of her books. Her grandmother's sewing basket, which Linda had kept on the window seat in the bedroom. Daniel answered the door. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping. "Good. I'm here for some personal items," I said. "I'll be in and out in 20 minutes. He didn't move from the doorway immediately. Then he stepped aside. The house felt different. It already felt like it didn't belong to me, which was strange, because legally it still did entirely. I think what had changed was that I'd stopped wanting it back. I retrieved the box and the sewing basket and a photograph of Linda and me from our Alaska trip in 2011. While I was in the hallway, Daniel appeared. "We can't find a place we can afford on short notice," he said. "Two-bedroom apartments in this area are going for $2,200, $2,400. We'd need first month, last month, security deposit. We don't have that kind of cash accessible right now." I looked at him steadily. "I know what apartments in this area cost, Daniel. I own 4 of them." He blinked. I don't think he'd known that. "You have 8 days left on the notice period. I suggest using them efficiently." I laughed. On the last day of the notice period, Gerald filed the eviction petition with Davidson County General Sessions Court. I had a hearing date within 2 weeks, which my attorney described as fast, reflecting the strength of the documentation. They hired a lawyer, a young guy from a firm that does a lot of tenant advocacy work, which I respect in principle, just not when it's being used to let 2 healthy adults in their 30s avoid accountability. The lawyer filed a continuance request arguing hardship. The judge granted 1 additional week. I was not worried. The hearing was a Tuesday morning in March. Gerald and I arrived 15 minutes early. Carla and Daniel arrived with their attorney 7 minutes before the session. Carla, in a gray dress with her hair pulled back. Daniel in a suit that fit him the way suits fit men who don't wear them often. They sat on the opposite side of the aisle. Carla looked at me once. I looked back. Neither of us smiled. The judge was a man in his late 50s named Halliwell, with the expression of someone who has presided over enough disputes to have categorized this one approximately 45 seconds after reading the filing. Gerald presented our case methodically. Property deed, 26 years of mortgage and tax payments in my name alone, utility accounts, the certified notice and delivery confirmation, the full accounting of 4 years of unreimbursed housing costs, totaling just over $160,000. He submitted all of it in organized binders, tabbed and labeled. Engineers appreciate organized documentation. So, as it turned out, did Judge Halliwell. Their attorney argued hardship. Argued that my daughter had an implied right to remain in the family home. Argued that the notice was retaliatory following a domestic disagreement. Gerald responded calmly. There was no written agreement of any kind. There was no financial contribution to ownership. The notice had followed proper legal procedure, and if the court wished to review the voicemail Daniel had left requesting that I vacate the property, he had a transcript and an audio file, both available. The attorney had not known about the voicemail. Judge Halliwell asked Daniel directly whether he had left such a message. Daniel's jaw tightened. I was frustrated, he said. It wasn't meant, literally. You told the property owner to find somewhere else to live, the judge said, reviewing the transcript Gerald had submitted. And your argument is that the property owner should not be permitted to act on that request. Silence. The court finds in favor of the petitioner, Judge Halliwell said. The respondents have 21 days to vacate the property at, and he read our address into the record. Failure to vacate will result in a writ of possession executed by the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. The gavel came down. Carla made a sound I recognized. The specific sound of a person whose world has just reorganized itself in a way they were not prepared for. Daniel's face went still, and closed the way faces do when the performance is over and there's nothing left to perform. Outside the courthouse, in thin March sunlight, Gerald shook my hand. What now? I list the house, I said. I'd decided this 2 weeks earlier, not because I needed the money, though the proceeds would be substantial. Because I didn't want to live in a house that held 4 years of being made to feel like an inconvenience. I wanted to start clean. The listing went up that same week. 4 bedrooms, 2,400 square feet, mature landscaping, Brentwood School District. Leased it at $740,000 based on comparable sales in the neighborhood. Within 6 days, I had 3 offers. I accepted the highest, $762,000. Cash buyer. Close in 30 days. A couple relocating from Atlanta with 2 kids and a dog and a very specific spreadsheet of neighborhood priorities. They seemed like people who would put the house to good use. Meanwhile, the cosigner situation had been moving in parallel. I'd submitted the formal withdrawal paperwork to both lending institutions 2 weeks before the court date. The first bank, for the truck loan, processed it in 9 business days. I received confirmation the same day we were in court. The second, for the equipment loan, took 3 more days. Both sent formal notices to Daniel by certified mail advising that due to changed cosigner circumstances, his loan accounts were under review and the full balances might become immediately due if he could not qualify independently or secure replacement cosigners. He could not qualify independently. His income had been inconsistent for years, and his debt-to-income ratio without my backing failed every standard metric. And there was no one in his life with the credit profile and financial willingness to take on $33,000 in joint liability. His parents were not in a position to help. Carla's salary alone didn't qualify. The truck, the commercial one he used for the landscaping business that he'd mostly stopped running, was repossessed on a Thursday. I know because Patricia saw the notice on a neighborhood app and told me with a look on her face that asked whether I was okay. I was okay. Daniel filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau about the bank, which accomplished nothing. He called Gerald's office twice, both times incoherent. Gerald documented the calls and added them to the file. On day 19 of the 21-day vacay period, Gerald drove by the property and confirmed activity consistent with moving. They left on day 21. I know because the property management company I'd hired did a walkthrough that afternoon. The report was not good. Several interior doors had been damaged. A hole in the drywall, in the master bedroom closet, gouges in the hardwood flooring in the hallway that looked like furniture had been dragged deliberately rather than lifted. The back patio door had a crack through the glass panel that hadn't been there during my last visit. I filed an insurance claim and a civil damages report. The repairs cost $11,400. My deductible covered the first $2,000. The rest came out of the insurance payout, which Daniel would face when the insurer sought reimbursement. One more thread in the fabric of consequences he was learning to wear. The house closed in early April. The Atlanta couple's daughter immediately put her name in chalk on the front step. I happened to drive by that evening on my way home and saw it. felt something I can only describe as appropriate. That house needed new handwriting in it. Net proceeds after mortgage payoff and closing costs came to $581,000. I bought a smaller place in Leiper's Fork, a town about 25 minutes outside Nashville that Linda and I had always loved. Farmhouse style, 2 bedrooms, a proper workshop space, a back porch that faced west toward a ridgeline of old-growth trees. I moved in during early May. Hung my bridge model on the wall of the workshop before I'd unpacked anything else. 3 weeks after I moved in, Carla called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Her voice was quieter than I'd heard it in years. Some of the architecture had gone out of it. Dad, it's me. I know. We're in an apartment in Antioch. It's fine. We're fine. A pause. Daniel lost the remaining landscaping contracts, without the truck. And the other equipment is gone too. He's looking for work. I see. I'm not calling to ask for anything. Another pause, longer. I just wanted you to know that I've been thinking about what you said, that I didn't call to apologize. I've been thinking about that a lot. I waited. I should have called. When he left you that voicemail, I should have called you that same night and told him he was wrong and told you I was sorry. I didn't. I don't fully understand why I didn't. I've been talking to someone about it, a therapist, and she says, Carla stopped. Anyway, I just wanted to say it. I'm sorry. For that, at minimum. At minimum. That phrase told me she was being honest rather than strategic, because a strategic apology wouldn't include an acknowledgement of how much more remained unsaid. Thank you, I said. That means something. Are you okay? Are you happy? I looked out the workshop window at the ridge. A pair of red-tailed hawks were working a thermal somewhere above the tree line. Patricia was coming for dinner. The bridge model was 3 weeks from completion. I'm genuinely happy, I said. For the first time in a long time. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was the kind of silence that means someone is sitting with something true they didn't expect to hear. I'm glad, Carla said finally. And I believed her. We didn't make plans. We didn't promise calls. I told her she could reach me at this number when she was ready. She said okay. We hung up. I stood in the workshop for a while after. Thought about structural engineering. About how a building that's been compromised doesn't always have to come down. Sometimes you can shore it up, reinforce the weak sections, build new load paths around the damage, and end up with something more honest than what was there before. Not the original structure. Something new. Something that knows where its weak points are. That's not a guarantee. It's a possibility. Whether it becomes real depends on the choices that come after. What I know for certain is this. I spent 4 years shrinking myself to fit inside a situation that was slowly dismantling me. I made excuses for behavior I shouldn't have tolerated. I confused loyalty with erasure, and when my son-in-law left a voicemail telling me to disappear, he accidentally did me the largest favor of my life. He gave me a reason to stop. I look back sometimes on a night I sat in the garage listening to that message, the bridge model half finished on the workbench. Linda's tools hanging exactly where she'd always hated that I left them. I think about the smile that crossed my face. People assume that's the moment I decided to fight back. It wasn't. It was the moment I decided to stop fighting at all. Stop fighting the tide of my own diminishment. Stop fighting the urge to protect my own dignity. Stop fighting the knowledge that had been accumulating for years. Some structures can't be saved by adding more support to a bad foundation. You have to go back to bedrock. Start from what's load-bearing and true. I found my bedrock. It's in Leiper's Fork now, on a porch facing west, with good coffee, and a woman who laughs at my engineering metaphors, and a hawk circling over the ridgeline like it's got nowhere else to be. That's not nothing. After everything, that is exactly everything. If this story connected with you, please consider subscribing to Pure Revenge Stories. Leave a comment and tell me what time it is where you're watching. We read everyone. I've been an engineer long enough to understand that structures don't fail all at once. They fail gradually. A hairline crack that gets ignored. A load-bearing wall that gets quietly compromised. A foundation that's been asked to carry more than it was designed to hold, for longer than anyone bothered to calculate. By the time the collapse happens, it looks sudden to everyone watching. But if you'd been paying attention, you'd have seen it coming for years. That's what 4 years in my own house felt like. Not a single catastrophic moment, but a slow, deliberate erosion. Daniel didn't walk in and declare himself the owner. He just rearranged the furniture. Then the driveway. Then the conversation. Then the driveway. Then the conversation. One small displacement at a time, until I was a stranger in the house where I'd raised her, grieved her mother, built half the walls with my own hands. What I've come to understand is that this is how entitlement operates. It rarely announces itself. It moves like water, finding the path of least resistance, widening the gaps in whatever you're too polite or too loving or too tired to defend. I was all three for longer than I should have been. The voicemail was actually a gift. I mean that without irony, because what Daniel did in his flat, businesslike 30-second message was make explicit what had been implicit for years. He told me to leave, and in doing so, he freed me from the last obligation I'd been carrying. The obligation to keep pretending the situation was something I could fix, by being more patient, more generous, more willing to shrink. Cause and effect is not complicated, even when it's painful. Daniel chose contempt over gratitude for 4 years running. Carla chose his comfort over my dignity when it counted. Those were their choices. The consequences that followed were not cruelty on my part. They were simply what happens when a structure built on someone else's generosity loses that foundation. You find out very quickly what was actually holding things up. What I want to say to anyone watching who recognizes this story from the inside is this: kindness is not weakness. Patience is not an invitation to be used. There is no version of love, parental or otherwise, that requires you to accept erasure. The most ethical thing I did in this entire situation wasn't the eviction or the cosigner withdrawal or the house sale. The most ethical thing I did was refuse to pretend anymore, because pretending wasn't protecting anyone. It was just deferring the reckoning. The intelligence required to act wasn't clever legal maneuvering, though that was part of it. It was the harder intelligence of recognizing what was actually happening, naming it accurately, and having the courage to respond to reality instead of to the version of events I wished were true. And the resilience, the part that took the most out of me, wasn't filing the paperwork or sitting in the courthouse. It was the night after Carla said her mother would have been ashamed of me. Sitting with that. Deciding it wasn't true, choosing to trust what I knew about Linda, about myself, about what 4 years of evidence had actually shown, over the story someone else needed me to believe. The bridge model is finished now. It's on the wall of my workshop in Leiper's Fork. Every piece in exactly the right place, load distributed properly, built to last. That's what I'm doing with the rest of my life, building something that will hold.